Good morning, rise and shine, Africa, and welcome to another episode of Wake Up Africa Saturday, the 10th of May 2025. We are almost getting to the half of the year, and well, to really be thankful to God, the year has unfolded very well, and we are on a very great trajectory. We just need to keep praying and hoping that the world still continues to be a better place. I'm your host, Austin Makandi, bringing Wake Up Africa live from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and I'm honored this morning to really dedicate Wake Up Africa to the struggles that young people undergo, the struggles, the fights, how and why and when and where and how young people can really get out of different struggles they face in life. But specifically, this show is dedicated to my friend and brother Sunday Kapesi, Tanzanian, who is currently in Kenya. And I really don't want to preempt his story, but it's a story that really makes most of us, if not all of us, really think and say, no, 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 something ought to be done. Something ought to be done. And we're not looking onto something else besides addiction. Addiction is, I will talk a little bit about addiction and then invite Sandy now, the guru, the expert, to really deep dive onto it in the next coming 1 hour, 2 hours of Wake Up Africa this Saturday morning. But looking onto the struggles that young people face, looking onto why do they get into the issues and how do they get out of them. And I'm happy some of the studies I was doing during the week said, you know what, you really can get out of addiction. You can get out of it. And this show is dedicated not only to the people who are struggling with addiction, but again, think of those who are looking after them. Think of, the society surrounding them. Do we sort of like discriminate people who are struggling with addiction, or do we embrace them with love? Sander will tell us all about that. I'm totally honored and delighted to have him on the show. But again, we have another gentleman who will introduce himself later on during the show, joining us all the way from Australia. I'm not sure if he's an Australian living in the US or is um, US citizen who grew up in Australia, but also has some insights on the topic. But to begin, as you all might have a clue already, I love numbers, I love figures, and I love stats. So about this statistics that I'm about to give, maybe Sunday my brother will update this, but as of 2021, about 296 million people. This is 2021. 296 million people all over the world of ages between 15 and 64. So what happens before that? There are people who have addiction issues before the age of 64. I mean, before the age of 15 and after the age of 64. We'll find out. But 296 million people in 2021 of ages between 15 years and 64 years had used psychoactive drugs, and about 39%, 39.5 million, you know, are estimated to be affected by drug use disorder, harmful pattern of drug use and drug dependence. So 39.5 million. This is again 2021. 296 have used psychoactive drugs, and of this, 39.5 million people are estimated. So roughly, figures. We don't keep numbers very well. Roughly, are estimated to have been affected by drug use disorder. Now, understanding addiction and how addiction hijacks the brain. I like this line. Addiction can be so difficult to overcome because it changes your brain and your motivation to quit. So first, it reprograms your brain and your motivation to quit. But understanding, this is the line that I want us to take home with at the beginning of the show and on the onset. Understanding the cause of your addiction can really really help you break it. Okay? So we're going to go on to what causes addiction. The word addiction is derived from the Latin term enslaved by or bound to. Okay, so addiction comes from Latin term enslaved by or bound to. Anyone who had struggled to overcome an addiction or has tried to help someone else to do so understands why. So you're either enslaved, chained, or you're bound to. Addiction exerts a long and powerful influence to the brain that manifests in three distinct ways. Okay, so addiction comes in the way of craving for an object or addiction, what you're addicted to, and Sunday will help me when he comes direct in. Sunday, good morning. You're already online. Delighted to have you this morning. This show is dedicated to all the great efforts and ways you're putting towards being the voice of the people who are addicted. Good morning to you.
Morning, Austin. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Sunday. Thank you so much for being on Wake Up Africa this Saturday, the 10th of May. And I'm giving a quick background to addiction, and then we are on to the topic.
Okay.
And things that I am already, taking from my brief research, you will probably help me clarify that. Appreciate it so much. So, addiction exerts, again, a long and powerful influence, and it comes in the way of craving for objects of addiction, loss of control over the use, and continuing involvement with it despite overdose, adverse, not overdose, despite adverse consequences. So, the ways that addiction comes is through craving or loss of control and continuing involvement with it, despite adverse consequences. For many years, experts believed not only alcohol and powerful drugs could cause addiction, but research has continued to show, as it's been shown in research, however, a lot certain pleasurable activities such as gambling, shopping, sex can also co-opt the brain. And yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. But I'm also, I also came to understand that addiction can happen to anyone. There are safe and effective ways to recover. Finding the right treatment option can be the key to someone's recovery journey. And this is what we're going to ponder on to the next 2 hours. Addiction is not a sign of weakness. This is one of the discussion I had with my brother Sunday, that addiction is not a sign of weakness, a character flaw, or moral failure. This is why I say, do we see those friends, family, neighbors, fellow citizens that are struggling with addiction? Do we judge them? Do we judge them as weak? Do we judge them with character flaw, or is that a moral failure? It is a common condition that affects millions of people of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all socioeconomic groups. We know the rich, the poor, middle class who are affected, who are impacted by this. And while there's no cause to addiction, there's no cause to addiction. There is hope it can be treated. Okay, so the things you're going to discuss include the truth about drug and alcohol addiction, how to recognize if you or your loved one is struggling with addiction, and how to successfully treat and manage substance misuse. Okay, we've been commonly using the word abuse, but again, I'm not an expert, but I'm happy to be speaking with the gurus this morning. We have substance abuse vis-a-vis substance misuse. Now, what is addiction related to? Abuse will probably result into um, judgment, but substance misuse. Yes, addiction is a mental illness. Yes, it's a mental illness. As I said, it gets into your brain in three different and distinctive ways, but the expert will speak about it in the next 4 minutes, and then we'll start giving or dissecting the topic. Addiction is a chronic disease that changes both brain structure and function. Okay, it changes both brain structure and function. Currently, in the US of A alone, 10% of adults are affected by addiction. Addiction swaps every day desires to the brain with those of the drug you are addicted to. So you wake up, you leave, you do what you have to do, but in your brain there's a crave that says 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You no longer enjoy what other people do as the brain changes. The changes start with recognition of pleasure and end with a desire toward compulsive behavior to fulfill that desire, that drive, that push, that adrenaline that says, yo, man, that coffee, yo, man, that, that cigarette, that beer, that anything that, the expert will speak about this shortly. Um, Sometimes when you try quitting, the addiction weakens your ability to manage impulses. So you become so weak to say, I want to let go of this. And we're going to go on to items and different items. Different items. Addiction exerts a long and powerful influence to the brain. And its influence, again, as I said, comes from craving, loss of control, and continuing involvement despite the problems that you are encountering with that. Okay, so you could be diabetic, for instance, and you still want that bottle of beer. So you already know you have a condition, but you still want to involve yourself with whatever that you're addicted to, despite the fact that it affects you. With drugs and alcohol addiction, substance hijack the brain reward system. Okay, so it hijacks, it stills, it covers, it clouds the brain reward system. This could lead to developing a physical dependence on the substance. Physical. Okay, so it attacks the brain and then it becomes physical. Some people develop unpleasant and sometimes dangerous physical symptoms when they stop or decrease substance abuse. So when you want to stop, there are consequences that are subjected or come with that. Okay, these changes results in a weakened ability to control impulse despite the negative. So you already know that these have negative consequences, but again you've weakened your ability to control the impulses. Substance misuse, my two final takeaway, or one: substance misuse can lead into serious physical, emotional, and social problems. Physical, emotional, and social problems. For instance, continued use of drugs or alcohol can lead to job loss, broken relationships, and other failures. These problems can increase stress and anxiety. So, when you're being rejected by the community because of the addiction you have, where else do you run to? We'll speak about that. So, we are now going on to Sunday, coming onto the program and telling us what he has prepared for us this morning. But again, we are totally, and I said, I'm celebrating Sunday as a hero and as an example. And he started a program this past month, to really be the voice of the voiceless. When now you've segregated, when you say you do not want to deal with addicted people, so how do you know their struggles when you do not even want to pay attention to them? And this for me is a success. And this, as I said, is not for Tanzania, is not for East Africa. This is for entire Africa. As we rewrite the narratives, as the objective for Wake Up Africa still remains to rewrite the narrative. Sunday Kapesi, welcome once again to the program. And as I said, honored and delighted to have you with us this morning. You have the floor, Sunday. Tell us.
Thank you, Austin, for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. Where do I begin? I like to begin with a statistic. So I think it's a UN report, maybe the UN Office on Drug Control, that said that 20% of the global population, 20%, are the ones that are either in rehab, in treatment, seeing a psychologist for addiction. 20%. So the question is, where are the other 80% where addiction is concerned? Are they non-addicts? Are they cured? Or are they not open about it? So for instance, before I went to rehab in 2022, I was part of the 80%. There's a term called functional addiction. This is that person who goes to work, pays the bills, has a relationship, pays their taxes, but they have addiction. And if you think about it, that means Sunday is part of the 20% that is seeking help, that has sought help, that is honest about it. So it begs the question, the other 80%, where are they? Do they know they have a problem? Are they in denial? I'll let you sit with that. Then I will flip it and tell you that 80% of resources towards addiction recovery, that is psychologists, psychiatrists, addiction specialists, treatment facilities, are going towards that 20% who have asked for help. So it's almost like until you hit rock bottom, like I did, and really mess up your life, and people then realize there's a problem, then the resources come to you. So it's almost the popular word in Swahili ni zimamoto. You know, once the house is on fire, that's when you say, let's get Sunday some help. Unfortunately. And what we should be doing is a proactive approach towards addiction and recovery rather than a reactive one. So what I've painted to you is a reactive process, which is what we have in many African countries. So that's my first point. My second point is actually understanding addiction. Now, addiction is characterized by being very impulsive, meaning you just need your coffee. Doesn't matter where you are or what you, I need my coffee. Compulsivity. Impulse is all of a sudden. Compulsive is repetitive. So you need it often. And then three, you lack the control to be able to be less impulsive and to be less compulsive. And addiction at the end of the day, to me, means you are numbing something, avoiding something, unaware you have something, and therefore you take the drugs, you take the alcohol to put you in a different state of mind. Now, chemicals, those are substances, they do alter the way your brain functions, and it's mostly about your neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are those cells in your brain that send signals for you to do this or to do that or to think about this or to think about that. And it affects your hormones, your mood, your happy hormones, your energy levels. So you're manipulating that. You take cocaine, for instance, those are what we call alcohol is a depressive. So you depress whatever it is you're feeling. While drugs like cocaine are the opposite. They stimulate. They're called stimulants. So if your mood is low, you take cocaine, you feel happier. You are happy when you drink alcohol, but that is because it is depressing something else. You see? So you're artificially messing with the way your body works because there's something. So point three, when you look at a drunk person and they're staggering and their speech is slurring, that to me is what we call a presenting problem. That is what your eyes can see. That is what your ears can hear. You go, this guy is drunk. Or if someone is high, they are too active or they are too quiet, you go, this guy is high. Their eyes are dilated, they don't look normal, for lack of a better word. That is the presenting issue. Now, society, for better for worse, looks at that only. You'll see on National Drug Enforcement Day, I assume that's what it's called, you'll have a skit on stage in a national stadium where you'll see people kind of drunk, people kind of high, trying to show you stay away from drugs. That is true, but I challenge that because a lot of people who are addicted are sitting in an office just like you are right now, writing policies, leading teams, but they have a problem they're either unaware of or they're aware of, but they're avoiding. And people around you tend to know, but they don't know how to approach it. And at the end of the day, Austin produces results. So I wish we would expand the description of addiction to include people, quote unquote, normal, who have this problem but have not hit rock bottom. That's the biggest majority, and those are the ones who are very difficult to convince to get treatment, to get help, because it's tied to your reputation. It's tied to, but I've not hit rock bottom. I can drive. You, as soon as you start to make excuses, probably there's a problem. So what do I mean by expand the definition? Let's use my story. My biggest addiction is food. It's called emotional eating or comfort eating, something we rarely talk about. In our African culture, maliza sahani yako. Like you have to finish your plate. You grow up with that. When I was stressed, I would eat. I think you've been to Namanga, Pale Edo's chips. That was my number one addiction. Didn't matter what time of day, it's very cheap. I'd go get chips. Chips vumbi. That not only adds your weight, so much cholesterol, and I did not even know I had that addiction until I went to rehab and I was told, you're 124 kilograms overweight. 3 years ago, I was twice this size. I did not know in my family we had hypertension. My grandmother, I think my grandfather as well, I could be wrong, but one of them had hypertension. That is hereditary. So I was knocking on the door of hypertension unknowingly. So lesson number one, find out your family health history, both psychological, emotional, and physical. It can give you clues on where you may have a problem if you do not take care of yourself. So I had to cut down my weight really quickly. And 104 days in rehab with a controlled diet, eating at the right time, no chips, no sodas. I came down to 94 kilograms by the time I left 3.5 months later. Sleeping better, breathing better, feeling lighter, and that took a lot of work. So that was my first addiction. My second one, I had a drug problem, and my drug of choice was cocaine. I'd been doing that since 2014. I believe, together with my counselor, that 2014 to 2020, it was controlled in the sense that I was never a rich guy, so I could not do more than I could afford. And to give you context, it costs about 100,000 a gram. A gram is pretty small. That's the standard going price. So I could afford 4 grams a month. You talk to any coke addict, they're probably on 10 grams a week. So it's not to justify, but just to put it into context that for about 6 years, it was something I did as rarely or as consistently as I did maybe have chicken. You know, if I'd have chicken twice a week, 3 times a week, I'd have Coke 2 or 3 times a week. But I lost control when my father died in 2020, and that grief really, I call it the rapture, because grieving my father opened me up to a lot of vulnerabilities. Grief induced my depression. I was highly anxious. We had a lot of family issues at the time that came to the surface, inheritance being one of them. I am the firstborn. A lot of pressure was on me. I had a young family. My relationship was in the ICU. All of these things sort of exploded 2020 to 2022. And I lost control. Eat a lot more, use a lot more drugs. And then my third addiction came alcohol. I've always been a social drinker. I think, Austin, you've known me, what, 25 years? I don't think you would associate Sunday with drugs, emotionally eating, or alcohol. Doesn't mean I instinctively said I need to hide these things. But we look at people the way we've always seen people. Sunday is extroverted, is a lot of fun, is a smart guy, and you stick with that. But 2020 to 2022, that surface started cracking. People started seeing problems. I was borrowing a lot of money to try and keep things afloat. And yeah, family intervened, friends intervened, they sat me down, lectured me. People avoid such things because you don't want to be unliked. And I go around telling people if you're really a friend and you see a friend is struggling, I will put my friendship on the line any day to be that one voice that can whisper and say, I think you have a problem, I think you need help. But we don't do that. We don't want to be bad. Wives struggle with husbands, husbands struggle with wives, parents also struggle with their kids. It's a tug of war. But I'm happy for my family and my friends who intervened and then reported me to my grieving mother. And my mother was crying that night when she confronted me. Where did I go wrong? Has the devil possessed you? I'd broken her heart. And at the end of our conversation, it was, I'm taking you to rehab. I could not say no because I was finished. I was tired. I was exhausted. My family had put me in the front seat. My mother had broken down. Off I went to rehab about a month later. And I'm glad I did because that's where I got to find out I had underlying mental and emotional issues. I'll put a pause there. I told you earlier, the alcohol, the drugs is a presenting problem. When I see an alcoholic or I hear of a drug user or someone addicted to gambling, my first question is, what is the underlying issue? Why is this person drinking so much? That's the first question. And this is what I learned in rehab. I did tests, the standard tests: anxiety, depression, suicide, addictive personalities, personality tests, psychometric tests. These you find them online. They standardized multiple choice questions. Very easy. But once you're done, AI calculates and it pretty much tells you your personality. You can agree or disagree with the points it tells you, but anxiety, depression, suicide are all on a relative scale. So acute, medium, or early signs, you get to understand. And I found out, wow, I was depressed. My depression was induced by grieving. I was highly anxious. We looked back into my family history. I'd always been anxious. My relationship with my father wasn't the best. We had to go into grief counseling. I don't know many people who think of grief counseling after losing a job, a partner, a child. I had lost my father. My relationship had ended 6 months before rehab, and I was unemployed. I didn't realize I was grieving these three things at the same time. Somebody else will tell you, but I moved on. You did. You've never walked in my shoes. I've never walked in your shoes. That's the other problem we have is we invalidate somebody else. I've done it before. I try to be mindful about it. So I find out I've got all of these mental health issues. And I chose to learn more about them. If I can learn about depression, I will learn, I will know better when I'm getting into one and how to get out of one. When I learn how to manage my anxiety, it means I learn about the triggers to my anxiety. And then the big one, ADHD, attention deficit hyper disorder, which is what? It's a mental health issue, mental illness, where I can be distracted very easily. And it's very difficult to bring me back on track. Or I can be very hyper focused. Same thing, I wind up forgetting other things. So you learn how to snap out of attention deficit, which is lack of focus, and how to snap out of hyper activity or hyper focus. And when I learned how to do these things, I started to manage my addiction better. I had insomnia. Often, I think my record was I went 4 or 5 days without sleeping. That is crazy. We try not to use the words crazy, but well, I also think you should use language people can understand and qualify it. So what am I doing awake for 4 days? If not eating kitimoto at 1 in the morning, drinking konyagi at 2 in the morning, having drugs at 3 in the morning, and by 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I still can't sleep. My head is pounding, so I've got my Panadols with me, and I could go 2, 3 days without sleeping. Hapo, I'm driving the kids. Hapo, I'm trying to attend to meetings. Right there, I'm going to court because we're dealing with some inheritance issues. I was a walking dead person. It's quite amazing. I never got into any accident, but I was late for a lot of important assignments. And I would disappear sometimes when the stress would get to me. I'd be gone for 1 or 2 days to a beach somewhere just by myself. Understand that that's someone with a spiritual crisis at the time. I don't know a way out. I can't ask for help. And I'm not alone. That's what I came to realize when I was in Riyadh. I was with very smart people who had also messed up in life because of their addiction and their underlying mental health issues. We look at addiction as a choice. It is not. Addiction is an illness. I have to put that very clearly. That drink, that drug, that coffee, that bet you put on your phone, that gambling trip to the casino, those are choices. The addiction that comes with it is an illness. What do I mean by that? Addiction has its stages. Five, some argue six. Stage one, you experiment. We've all been there. That first beer, that first bet, that's called experimenting. Second stage is regular use or social use. That's the social drinker. On occasion, you'll have that champagne. Nothing wrong with that. Then you get to stage three, risky use. What's risky use? Austin, you're telling me you don't have any friends you know? Put cognac in a Dasani bottle with tonic, shake it, put that bottle, so this is a sanitizer, but put that bottle right there in the meeting and they start drinking. You can smell the breath. You know they're drinking during work hours, which they shouldn't do. That's called risky use. That's being in the office knowing your boss is about to call you for a meeting. You're very anxious. You go to the bathroom. You smoke some weed or you have some drug just to give you that boost. That's risky use. You can get caught, you can lose your job, and that becomes highly addictive because you get away with it and you feel you're invincible. Stage four, that is dependency. The best example I can give you is people who love their coffee. There is somebody who will not start their day without a cup of coffee. There is somebody that will not end their day without, I don't know, a meal, like an intentional meal. I need to eat this particular meal before I go to sleep. That's being dependent. It is a situation that you're linked to the addiction. That's dependent. The rest of the day, they can go without coffee. Then comes stage five, which is addiction. Now, at that stage, it doesn't matter if it's coffee in the morning, doesn't matter if it's 10 a.m., it doesn't matter if it's 4 p.m. I need my coffee. You'll do everything you can to get that coffee. Those are the five stages of addiction. So when you say addiction, it is actually stage five. And the risk we take is you'll see someone drinking from time to time and you go, you're an addict. I think that's also a problem. We are not supposed to diagnose other people. We can show concern, but then encourage someone to get a medical, psychological evaluation or diagnosis. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm training to become an addiction support specialist. And I put that caveat out there. What I talk about is from lived experience. And I said there could be six stages. The sixth one is you accept you have these problems and therefore you go for help. And some argue there's a stage seven, which is relapse. Relapse means umeanguka tena and you're right back to the beginning, and we'll get to that a little later. So let me sum up my monologue by saying the following. We've covered the nature of addiction as impulsive, compulsive, lack of control. We've covered the stages of change. I've mentioned that we should expand the definition of addiction. By expanding, that's why I started with emotional eating. People tell me, ha, kaka, kula tena ni addiction. I say, yeah. If you're eating because you're stressed, if you're eating because you're angry, if you're eating because you're restless, you're addicted to food. Food should be a joyful, come together, tule pamoja, part of life. It shouldn't be somewhere you escape to. People are addicted to their offices. Like, I need to be at work, I need to be in the office. That can also be an addiction. People are addicted to chaos and drama. If you tell someone, just sit still, relax, everything's okay. You see someone fidgeting, like, I cannot sit by myself. That can also be termed an addiction. Could be restlessness, but if you cannot control something, and that something is controlling you, then there could be an addiction. Now, addiction does not discriminate. This is the line I love to use. It does not discriminate on basis of profession. Lawyers are highly addicted. I'm a lawyer. Journalists are addicted. People in the clergy are addicted. I've met all sorts of professions in rehab and out of rehab. And I think this is the part people need to talk about because you tend to think, weed smokers are Rastafari only. People addicted to pombe kali ni watu ambao wana hela. People who are addicted to heroin ni watu ambao hawana kazi. I don't know who came up with these titles. Addiction covers everybody. Dare I be even more confident and bold as to say politicians are addicted, husbands are addicted, wives are addicted. We need to get to women at some point because the social pressure on women to be perfect is insanely high, and a lot of women are addicted and do so in private, which is really, really terrible because then it's difficult for them to get help. Treatments. What kind of treatments are out there for addicts? Some of us went the
Sunday,
rehabilitation.
maybe before we go to treatment,
Yes, sir.
let me come in a little bit and really thank you for that introduction. And the more you kept speaking, the more I related. I related, and this is why we have Monday Wake Up Africa. This is why we have Wake Up Africa, and I'm mesmerized by so many facts and findings. This was not my intended question, but have you documented? Are you thinking of documenting? I know this is going to remain on YouTube, and people can go to YouTube and learn more on addiction. But have you documented? Are you thinking of writing a journal, a book on addiction that millions, more than the numbers that you've given, the stats that you gave, could really benefit from the knowledge? Because for once, when you invited me to the program that I regret having missed because of other engagements, I I told you, you remember we had a discussion like, Sunday, why do you need to come out and speak about this? But now, as we're talking about this, I'm realizing how powerful it is to really come out and speak about this, because you do not know you have a problem until you know you have a problem. So I want to understand first. This was, as I said, this was not the question that I had in mind to ask, but have you thought of documenting this?
So, very good question. The answer is yes. I've written over 120 articles about my journey into addiction, my journey through recovery. I've reached out to a couple of editors, a couple of friends to try and help me put it all together. And so far, I've been asked, do you have money? Which I don't have. We'll get back to you, and they don't. So it's been discouraging a bit, but I have the material already. I've written already. I just need someone to help me compile them, and I'd love to put it as an African story by an African man explaining in real time his journey through addiction, recovery, and mental health. So the answer is yes. Maybe you've got an editor that you know that's happy to invest in this project. I'd love to have it in English, Swahili, in Zulu. I have the material already, and
Thank you.
it's there. So if
We
you
are
can help me
going
with that, I would love to. I'd love to put it out there.
we are going to work together on that. You have my word to that. Now, Sunday, at what point, we probably spoke about this, but at what point do you call someone an addict? And here I want to give myself as an example. Okay.
Okay.
When I see a pool table,
Hmm.
when I see a pool table, I can't resist it. For me, even if I'm jet lagged and someone calls me, yo, let's shoot some pool, you know, and I have work at 7, I could probably leave the pool table at 6:30, go shower and change and trans night. Am I addicted to playing pool?
Simple answer is yes. Remember my
Ah.
definition? Remember my definition? Impulsive, meaning you've not planned to do it. Compulsive, meaning it's repetitive, lack of control. So you, my friend, are addicted to pool. I'm not going to recommend you go to rehab for 104 days. I'm going to compliment you first by saying you've presented the issue. We've had a conversation about it. And I think your laugh is acknowledgement that yes, I think I have that problem. That to me
Now,
is 50% of the job done.
now this is when my question comes, Sandy. At what point do you call someone an addict? Because I can do months without shooting pool. I can see it and say I have my family with me. I'm not going to play pool. I can see it. I can see it and say, well, I have work tomorrow. I do not need to go and play pool. I can wake up at 11 at night from a sleep from, let's say, 6 7, and say I want to go play pool, but then no, I have work tomorrow. Um, at what point would you definitely say that yes, Austin, you're addicted to playing pool table? Because I kind of have a feeling, and I don't play pool table in Dar es Salaam because the best time that I could is after work, and for me after work I want to spend time with the family. Um, so at what point, Sunday, do you conclusively say, Austin, you're addicted? And I'm recalling to you, and thank you, Elliot, joining us from Burundi. We will be with you shortly. Thank you, Sunday, for bringing the stages. So experiment, regular use or social use. Experiment, I'm probably past that. Because
Yep,
I
with
already
an
play
you scored an
pool.
A. You scored an A there. You passed
I scored an A, no
that.
doubt. I'm past that. You spoke of a social use, which is why I play pool. I play pool to socialize. I play pool to, you know, easen up my brain after a long day of work. Then I say, I could do a couple of games, but I've not gotten to a risky use. Although I must tell you, if I don't mention the fact that pool table is a furniture that is not going to miss in my house, then if you call that a risky use, then well and good. But again, I'm not at a dependency level. It's not like I would get out of the office to go play pool. But if I had a pool table in my office and someone comes claiming to be very good, I would, skip work. If I'm in the middle of a meeting, I would not jump off my meeting and say, yo, I got a couple of games to play. No, no, no. So I'm not a risky use. I'm not a dependency. Would you still call me at a social use an addict? And even the way I define social use is when I travel, when I go outside Dar es Salaam for work, and there are joints that I would definitely find go play pool because I'm not a TV person. I read books, but after reading books, you want to really distract your mind with something else. I love pool and I play pool where there's some very good old school music. Do I still need some attention to addiction Sunday?
So that's a very good question. And the best answer I can give you is this. Another word for addiction is negative coping mechanisms. I prefer that terminology to addiction because addiction is a bit too narrow, but also broad at the same time. Narrow in the sense that, like now you're saying, am I addicted to pool? That's a very narrow kind of definition. But it's also quite broad because they're positive coping mechanisms. If you're playing pool to relax and socialize, I'm not going to say that's a negative addiction. I'm going to say that's a positive addiction because you get to socialize with people, right? So it's only negative if you're playing pool to avoid something, numb something, compulsively, impulsively, and you cannot control yourself. Then it is negative. But like you said, I like to read books. I like to play with my kids and spend time with my family. But when I'm on my travels, that's when I tend to play pool more often. So in that particular context, I'd say yes, you're addicted to pool because the challenge for you is when you're traveling, when you're working on your travel trips, and you hear old school music, which then triggers your need for pool, or you're playing pool and that triggers your need for old school music. In that particular context, yes, you are. That's my number one answer. Number two, you've gone through the stages of addiction, which is very important for two reasons. One, ni kujitambua we mwenyewe. Which stage are you in? Two, doesn't that make sense now when you think of some of your friends and your family, I want to assume, who you believe are addicted, but now you're looking at them from what stage are they on? For instance, hypothetically, I think my uncle is addicted to alcohol. Now you're asking yourself, is he dependent on it? Is he addicted? Is he a risk taker? And it's important to know this because now you can tell which stage someone is in. If they're a social user, social drinker, nothing to be too worried about. But when you start seeing this person having alcohol in their coffee thingy in the car, you go, "Oh, this guy is taking risks. What to do about it?" And my third answer, and you want to take this down, is what is called the trans theoretical stages of change model. Change itself goes through a couple of stages. Very simply put, stage one is called pre contemplation. This means you're unaware that you have a problem, which in other words means you're in denial. Denial itself has stages. We'll come to that in a second. Stage two, contemplation. You're aware, but you're not ready for change. This is someone saying, "Yeah, I drink a little bit more than usual, but I think I'm okay." This could also be what you were saying. I don't think I'm really addicted to pool. I mean, I read books, I play with my kids, but maybe I'm a little bit addicted to it. That's contemplation. You're aware of it, but you're not ready. Then there's preparation. This is where you're intending to take action soon. Remember during my introductory monologue, I said the family intervened, my mother sat me down, and during those heated conversations, I can tell you, I was like, you know what, even if it's for them or to shut them down, I'll go to rehab. That means I was preparing. At that particular stage, I knew I had a problem. I knew the secret was out. I was preparing for change. Stage four is action. This is where you're actively trying to modify your behavior. If you came to the show or had been to the show last Wednesday, and it will be on social media on Unconventional Stories Unmasked, the first speaker, Jeremy Makundi, brave guy, has been sober now, I think a year after 28 years of drinking. He doesn't hang out in the same drinking spots he used to. He's cut off a lot of friends that he used to drink with. He is changing his patterns of behavior, meaning more time with the kids, more time reading rather than just being lazy around. That is the action stage. Me going to rehab, me writing about my journey, me talking about addiction. That's taking things into action. Stage five is maintenance. This is sustaining your new behavior. A lot of people start falling in the maintenance stage because we have something called dry sobriety. This is when you've had treatment, you've had intervention, you've had help, you've got good motivation. I'll give you a simple example. When I left rehab, 94 kilograms light, I was 124 going in. I was sleeping better, I was eating well. I started running marathons. I cross addicted. It's called a cross addiction. So now I became addicted to exercise. I went 13 months without drinking, without emotionally eating, without using drugs. I was addicted to TV. I did not switch on my TV for 13 months. I was addicted to my phone. I reduced my phone time. I went cold turkey, as they call it. That lasted 13 months. I lapsed, meaning one day I made a poor decision without even thinking about it. I went to a particular place where I used to do coke by myself. And even before I sat down, I had already called my dealer, or rather, I'd thought of calling my dealer. And it took me about 30 minutes to get his number because I deleted all these numbers, but I was that motivated. That's called a lapse. It's just umeanguka and you pick yourself up. But 13 months, I went without doing anything. And we can talk about the lapse later if you wish. But the difference between a lapse and a relapse is you're gone. Your patterns are destroyed. You're back to compulsively using, and you're doing it now intensely. You measure a relapse by the depth of your addictive personality, the damage you've done, your lack of willpower, frequency, intensity. That is a relapse. A lapse happens. Relapse happen. In fact, 80%, if not 90% of people who are addicted will relapse within the first year. It goes up to about 60% will relapse within the next 3 years. And the reasons are very simple. You're in a controlled environment, a rehab facility, or a sober house, or in treatment, and then now you're out in the outside world. December ikifika, everybody's drinking. Your own family is drinking. You're the only one choosing not to drink. The pressure is on for you to drink, and you're not resilient enough. So think about that. I lapsed after 13 months. I had my first relapse after 2.5 years. And both of those had different societal issues at the time going on next to me. We slap the Bible, if I may use that phrase, on someone who relapses. You don't have willpower. The devil has possessed you. We're going back to stage one. Other people's disappointment is put on your shoulder. I advise and say when someone has relapsed, they need compassion. Because trust me, they're beating themselves up more than you. But on the stages, that is stage five, maintenance. That's where I am. That is being on this show at 7 in the morning after the exercise I did in the morning. That is making sure I'm in bed on time. That is being motivated, that is putting patterns and systems in place. That's talking to my psychologist every week, my sponsor almost every day, reading, learning, and you pick up these things and what works for you. And then stage five is relapse. We've touched on that already. This is returning to old behaviors common in the cycle of change. And this is where I stress. And I'll use a quote. You like reading? Have you read Atomic Habits by James Clear?
I have read Atomic Habits, and it's on my shelf in my office. Yeah.
That's a beautiful book for anyone who's trying to change their addiction. And there's one line by James Clear I love the most. You either rise to the level of your dreams or your goals, or you sink to the levels of your systems and your patterns.
Mm.
So if you don't change your patterns, you're going to relapse. If you change your patterns, improve your habits, you increase your chances of a relapse. And at some point, you increase your chances of sobriety. And I'll give you a second quote by a guy called Joanne Harry, a very popular um, speaker on matters of addiction and behavior change. And he says, the opposite of sobriety, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection. You need to make healthier connections with yourself. There is not a single addict, I believe, who's happy about their addiction. They may be happy when drinking, when using, but they're not happy about their addiction.
Mm.
The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection. Healthier connection to yourself, healthier connection to God, healthier connection to your family, healthier connection to your society. You improve those, you will improve your addiction. So those are the stages
Okay,
of
Sunday,
change.
allow me to bring onto the show. We are joined by my brother Elliot Jejimana, joining us from Burundi, and I'm happy to say that our dear Alan Subi as well has joined. Elliot, good morning and welcome to Wake Up Africa Saturday, the 10th of May 2025. As we are looking onto the struggles, as we're looking onto how to get rid and get away from addiction. And Alan, good morning to you as well. Let's have Elliot and then Alan to give their take onto the topic today. Elliot? Okay, Elliot, you come in at any more point in time when you want to comment. But Alan Subi, good morning, all the way from Uganda. I believe in Kampala. You are a young lady of many destinations. I do not know where you could be today. You could be at Munyonyo. You could be at. Delighted to have you with us this morning.
I'm happy to be here, Austin. Have good morning. I'm in Chwatule. I'm in Kampala, and I'm
Oh,
happy to
fantastic.
join in on the conversation.
Thank you
Good
so
morning,
much.
Sandy.
Sunday, you're on mute.
Good morning, Nyabo. That's the word, right? Morning, Nyabo.
Yeah, exactly.
Been doing my research. I'm learning.
And for Shizo, Alan, Sunday's accepted to join me when I visit Uganda next. So please expect us anytime soon now. We'll just have to check on Sunday's schedule as mine is opening up at the same time typing up. Alan, we've been
Yeah.
speaking about addiction, and I'm happy that you've joined
Sorry,
us.
Austin. Sorry, Austin. Just one thing. If I'm going to accept this invitation, I hope my sister is going to make us some of that good Ugandan matoke. I haven't had that in like 10 years. Without that, I'm not coming.
I hope that's not an addiction, Sunday.
Oh, that is definitely an addiction. A positive one.
Alan Subi, you have the floor. Do you have a question to Sunday? Do you have a comment? Do you want to chip into the topic today? Alan?
Oh my dear, is it just me or is the network
No,
terrible?
it is just you. But please, do you
Oh
happen to have
really?
any question to Sunday? Do you have any input to the topic? Please, Karibu
Uh,
Wake Up Africa.
No, I missed what Sunday had to say. I hope I'm okay now.
Yeah, you are. Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Um, Today's topic is interesting because I believe we have tackled so much on what would be viewed as the bigger picture, and it's now interesting that we get down to the grassroots to what could actually be the heart of some of the bigger problems that we've been discussing, and the poster you shared earlier also revealed that Sunday is I don't like that word though, recovering addict, because I have worked with a few at the World Health Organization, people that have since recovered. They've beaten addiction, and they've been strong for 10 years, but then they still call themselves recovering addict. I don't know why it's that way. But yeah, it's great that Sunday gets to share his story with the world, and then that he's chosen this path. Austin, can you hear me?
We hear you, Alan. Please proceed. You're loud, you're clear, you're articulating very well. Please proceed. Sunday will react to your comment. And now you have disappeared. Elliot, do you want to Elliot, are you able to join us now? Sunday, as Elliot is coming in, I want to go back to one of the points you said. There's definitely a mental and emotional underlining cause. Mental and emotional underlining cause. Now, by this, let me ask you bluntly, who is not addicted on earth? Because there are times where people are addicted to shopping. There are people that are addicted to exercising. And as again, I'm using me as an example. I would want to play pool after a long day. Although, as I said, I would only do that when I'm outside Dar es Salaam here in Tanzania. Um, but then It's 90, it's probably 60 40. 60 years I would go play pool, because I enjoy the company, I enjoy the music, I enjoy the challenge, I love the challenge. There's a time I traded pool table to golf, so I would still play golf in the morning and play pool in the evening. I really am in denial, Sunday. I really must say this. I'm in denial to accepting that I'm addicted to playing pool table because it does not have a control of me. Now, my question to you is any and every lack of control mean addiction? Is every and any lack of control to anything mean uh, directly means it's an addiction?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so let me answer Subi's question first. You talked about he knows people who've been sober 10 years plus, etc., who still refer to themselves as recovering addicts. So there's a misconception that there's a cure to addiction, meaning spiritual cure, psychological cure. There isn't. It's an illness. If you compare it to diabetes, if someone manages their insulin, eats the right food, stays away from sugar, I think, um, they live diabetes controlled, not diabetes free. As soon as that person gets off their insulin, they're in trouble. So the same thing goes for alcoholics, gamblers, substance use users. If there's some people, as soon as they get that one drink, they're done. Like they'll go on a bench for 3, 4, 5 days. 20 years later, I know of someone, 20 years sober, retirement happened. He doesn't quite know what to do with himself, celebrated a bit too much at the farewell party. He relapsed. So when you hear someone say they're cured, I would be very skeptical about that. All I would say is they are managing their addiction well. They've got the right team around them. They've got good momentum and motivation. But I like to call myself as a proud recovering addict. I am proud that I am in recovery. And I think that is important. But it also means every day I need to make better decisions. Every day I need to be very mindful. I need to follow my routine. I need to adapt to my environment. I need to say no to people who are triggers, to places that are triggers. I make a decision every day not to drink. And in that context, I will always be in recovery. It sounds negative, but it's the truth. And this is why there are people who still go to AA 20, 30, 40 years later, because that's a support group that helps you feel seen, feel heard, feel safe. That's the best answer I can give. Now,
And
to your,
go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to your question now. Kindly summarize it to me again, your question.
So my question is, does it mean that any and every lack of control means addiction?
Okay. So, a couple of things to break down there. I consider addiction in this context to be a negative coping mechanism. So, in that context, if playing pool is your way of avoiding issues and not a way to relax after a long day's work, then I don't think you're coping negatively. I think you're socializing. However, if you find that in a particular context, like every time when you're on safari, and that happens to be a lot, you consider pool as the only way to relax, then I would say, okay, maybe there is an addictive tendency. Maybe not a problem, but there is a link to whenever I travel, I play pool. When you see a connection like that, you should look into it. You mentioned in your question, maybe you're in denial. So you know what? Let's break down denial. Because denial has its stages. And everything I'm telling you, I've learned the last 3 years. I didn't know any of these things before that. I wish I did. And I wish more people would learn these things because I think when you take addiction proactively, then you can get help before you hit rock bottom like Sandy did. and you damage a lot of lives, including your own. Stage one of denial. This is called complete denial. In other words, I don't have a problem. Period. Nokta. Do not tell me anything more. Stage two, minimization. This is when you use words like, okay, but maybe I drink too much, but it's not that serious. I'm always on time to work. That's minimization. Stage three, I love this one, blaming others. If I did not travel with Austin, I would not have drunk. If my wife did not stress me, I would not have used drugs. There's always the word if. If this and that, I would not have done this and this and that. That's blaming others. Stage four, justification. I only use when I'm stressed. I only play pool when I travel. So to answer your question, I think you're on stage four of denial. When I travel, that's when I play pool. So it could be the truth, but at the same time, there is a problem there. You know, I used to say, when someone told me, don't you think maybe you're addicted to substances? I would say, but I only use 4 grams a month. It is true, but you're justified. How about you don't use? And by the way, there are tests for alcohol use disorder, as we call it, and there are tests for substance use disorder. It's like 10 questions, or is it 20? You fill them, and if you have picked 3 or 4, you're addicted. Because it's designed in such a way that when you answer the questions honestly, then either you are addicted or you're not addicted. So those tests are there. Stage five, comparison. These are stages of denial, remember. Stage five is comparison. At least I'm not like those people who can't drive themselves home. At least I'm not those people that anytime they see a casino, they have to go in. If you're comparing, you're in denial. Stage six, compliance without acceptance. Here's a line. Fine, I'll go to rehab. This brings
Compliance
back so much
without
memories. Compliance without acceptance, which means you want to please other people, you want to kill the discussion, so you just go, okay, I'll go to therapy. But in your mind, you just want to shut down the conversation. And then stage seven, partial acceptance. Maybe I have a problem, but I don't need full treatment. Maybe I have a problem, but I don't need medication. When you add the word maybe, this person is getting closer to accepting. And then the last stage is full acceptance, stage eight. I can't do this on my own, I need help. This is where you admit you're powerless and you're open to real change and recovery. Understand this, Austin. If you can get these 8 points of denial, everybody you know in your life who has a negative coping mechanism, a negative addictive personality, you can be able to say, okay, huyu tumwache kidogo, yuko kwenye stage 4. He's in stage 5. He's in stage 6. And it shifts. And the truth is, you either need pressure, you need pushing, you need to hit rock bottom, you need prayers, whatever it takes to get someone to accept. Because by law, you can force someone to go for treatment if they are a danger to themselves or others. And this is where people are very uncomfortable. Nikimlazimisha kwenda rehab, he'll do it just for me. You know what? Mlazimishe, because if he winds up there, possibly he will take the next steps now and learn a lot more things. If it wasn't for my family intervening, my mother crying, I probably would not have gone to rehab. And here I am 3 years later saying, you know what? I hated how I went there, but I'm glad I did because here I am today.
Sunday, I am not like those people who go all night shooting pool. They would not go to sleep without shooting pool. I am in so much, I'm on all the stages of denial, I must say. I'm on stage one, Um, I'm on stage one, which is complete denial. I'm not addicted. I'm on stage two. Maybe when I travel, I could be addicted. I'm on stage three. Um, if I had not traveled, I would not play pool because when I'm in Dubai, I don't play pool. I'm on stage four.
We're getting
Holiday is
somewhere.
when I travel. I'm on stage five. I'm not like, there are those people, Sunday, you go to a pool table and they're there. I'm not that kind of people. I'm on stage six. I am compliance without acceptance.
Yeah,
You
maybe.
know, but maybe I could be addicted. Maybe I don't know. But no, I'm not. But let's have Alan Subi. Alan Subi is back. Alan, welcome back. Good morning, and this is Wake Up Africa.
I'm glad I've connected to another machine, and this seems perfect because I could hear Sunday very well. I'm
Beautiful.
glad to join you guys this morning. What an interesting topic. I don't know about your addiction to pool, but I know you're addicted to sweet stuff. You're on all those levels of addiction.
Are you snitching now, Alan? Are you snitching, my dear?
What an interesting topic because you see, going by what Sandy has been sharing, we might all have an addiction. It could be, so for us, and by us, I mean you, if it's a sugar addiction, you don't think it's such a big deal. You're saying, it's not alcohol, it's not substance. I'm good. Mine is okay. It won't get me into a mental hospital. And yet, hearing his submission, I feel like we all have things that we could be working on to be better at. What I was saying earlier is that I feel like over the months we have dealt with what we perceive as the big stuff, the big issues in Africa, Africa's biggest problems. So it's a good thing that this morning we then get down to let's say the grassroots, the root of some of these bigger problems. Because if we don't deal with addiction, the prevailing and increasing numbers of addicts, especially among the youths, then we shall have bigger problems to discuss tomorrow. So yeah, this was a great topic to discuss, and thank you, Sunday, for sharing your story. I've missed a lot of it, but from the most recent submission, just taking us through the stages, I think it's been a good conversation, and I'll catch up. So yeah, those are my opening remarks, Austin.
Thank you so much, Alan Subi. I am in denial that I am an addict to sugar. Although when you mentioned it, I recall how many times I would stop by a supermarket just to buy a chocolate bar and chew it as I go
Yeah,
home.
yeah,
And it's the same question that I asked Sunday, that who is not an addict? Who is not addicted? Because we all have our craves, Alan, and we sometimes you just want to be around, good people with you, and I'm happy that Sunday speaks of negative coping mechanism, you know, negative coping mechanism. Why do I want sugar? There's a way that body demands, and Sunday, please come in here. There's a way that body demands, for instance, sugar when it's depleted. Okay, would that still be an addiction? There's a way that body demands. It's like when you're thirsty and you want to drink water, you know it would that still be be termed as addiction? But I would also like you've mentioned it many times, the role of family and friends towards either getting you into or out of addiction. I would really want that to really feature in this book, that I really want Wake Up Africa to work tirelessly towards producing it. We will talk about this at some point. But tell me, Sunday, when the body craves for sugar and you go for sugar, and Alan and I have been on a couple of food joints together when I visit Uganda, or when she comes to Tanzania, then we go to a place and she would just see me consuming sugar. Um, What do you have to say about that?
So I was cheering and clapping because when Alan Subi ratted you out, for me, in my mind, I'm like, that's the kind of friend you need. That's the kind of friend we all want, who tell us what we don't want to hear, because that is the truth. Now, if you have friends who buy you that chocolate every single day or wait for you to buy, then they're part of the problem. So, number one, addiction does not happen in isolation. Your society, your environment, your family either actively or passively participated. What do I mean? There's something called enabling. Your wife can be a very good enabler. Your mother can be a very good enabler because of the nature of that relationship you have. They will make exceptions because you know how to trigger the emotional buttons. Codependency. What does that mean? People have a savior complex. What does that mean? That means I want to help you. So therefore they disable you from taking responsibility. They disable you from being autonomous. And it's an addiction. Codependency is an addiction. You love your boyfriend so much, you don't want him to be in pain. You'll buy him that alcohol, which then calms his nerves down. So understand the following things I've said. Addictive or negative coping mechanisms attract enabling behavior, attract codependency. And when you get these 2 points and start looking at relationships, you'd say, you see, Sunday's sister, I have one sister who's very black and white. Sunday, you're addicted. I may not have liked to hear what she'll say, but that's how she dealt with it. I may have had a friend who would go like, okay, just just do a little bit of drugs, but no more. I'm not blaming them. That's the nature of the situation. So they're part of my problem. Recovery, on the other hand, is a team sport. I promise all of you in this call, you cannot recover alone. People have tried and they have failed because even locking yourself up in a room, you still need someone to get you groceries or your medication. So, what's lacking in recovery is that team effort. You know, if you go to your father, hypothetically, and they're a very Bible centered person, you'll be told you're a demon, you have a demon in you. So you become very sensitive to going to that person for help. You know, if you go to so and so, they're going to remind you of all the faults that you've done. And that's why people struggle to recover in families. Because in Swahili, unakumbushwa. You hurt these people so much, you did not let go of the old you. I still face those problems today. People can still remember my chaotic times, and they're having a problem letting go. I've let go and I'm moving on. So at some point, the recovering addict or alcoholic has to have very strong boundaries to kind of go, I'm not that person. I don't need to hear this negative talk. I'm moving on. You don't get that overnight, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Now,
absolutely.
yeah, but to your question, sugar. I laughed again because it came to my attention in rehab that I had a sugar addiction. Austin, I used to drink 6 to 7 sodas every day from the first day I joined the law firm, age 20, 21, I think. I did not realize I had an addiction to soda. But the most interesting thing is, why was I addicted to soda? There's something called dopamine. That is the hormone in your body or in your brain that makes you feel happy. That's that feeling you have after good sex. That's that feeling you have after a good run, after that chocolate bar, when you feel happy. That's dopamine. So I instinctively knew that when I was sad or stressed, take a soda. It would give me a boost in my energy levels. I had a serious addiction with soda. It I've been in and out of dentists for root canals for the longest time. And I didn't think it was soda. The other problem with too much sugar, you're up at night. You're highly irritable when you don't have it. Triggers insomnia. Uh, your weight goes out of control. Like there's so many reasons why sugar is not good for you. So once you admit it, then you try and change that behavior. I changed to tea. So I now take 5, 6 cups of tea. I'm not
Is that
over
an
on
addiction?
sodas. Yeah, so it is. I've crossed addicted now, right? And I have tea, more likely without sugar. And if I have sugar, it's 1 teaspoon of sugar. So some people can go cold turkey, but the most of us, it's a gradual change in behavior. So I'm happy with 5, 6 cups of tea a day than 5 sodas a day. Someone will tell you, eliminate soda altogether. I'm working on it, you know? So I drink a soda now after a long run, after exercise. And once in a while, when my mood is completely off, but I'm mindful of my soda intake. So, yes, soda is a negative coping mechanism. Sugar is a negative coping mechanism because there are
Sunday,
negative consequences to it.
Sunday, what defines? Elliot, are you happy and ready to join us? Let me know. You can pop it at any time. I see you coming
Good
in and
morning,
out.
everything.
Elliot, good
Good
morning
morning,
from
South
Burundi.
Africa.
How are you?
Hello, do you hear me?
Well, it's cracky. Elliot, if you get it out on a better reception, please join us at any time. I would really want to appreciate your input. You've been on the show from the beginning. Sunday, when you speak of a negative coping mechanism, negative, please elaborate the word negative. Where at what point is negative negative? Because if I want to, for instance, oftentimes when I feel, which is I'm grateful I've managed to control my stress levels to 3 seconds. But when I feel stressed, and if it persists, this is why and when I want to shoot pull. Okay. How would pull be an addiction and be a negative coping mechanism whereby I use pull to really bring me back to perspective, back to focus?
Okay, so I'll answer in two parts. One, why are you playing pool? If you're playing pool to relax, I think that's a positive thing. If you're playing pool to avoid a discussion with your wife, then maybe that's negative. So it's the why you're doing something that's stage one of understanding it is negative or positive. The
But
why.
it is not avoiding discussion. It's buying time for the situation to calm down before you engage in a discussion. It's saying I need a fresh mind. I need a fresh perspective. Let me just go out, freshen up. I used to go for a walk up until it started becoming, it's a rainy season all across, and the roads could be muddy. Then I said, okay, so I would go to a joint, shoot some pool, go home and engage in a discussion, or go now, open up that computer and respond to that email, etc, etc. But when is negative negative?
Exactly. So I understand your point. That's my thing is the why. If you need some time to breathe, relax, reconfigure yourself, and then go back into battle, I think that's positive. But that one guy who's always at that pool table every single evening for many, many hours, avoiding issues, that's negative. The second part is the consequences of what you're doing. So if you're taking 5, 6 sodas a day, you end up in and out of a dentist uh, clinic, then that's negative because the consequences are negative. What is a positive coping mechanism? When you used to walk, that's exercise. That's clearing your brain. That is knowing that at this moment I'm very stressed, I'm very angry, I don't trust what I would say. So your why is positive. The consequences of walking are positive. So that's how I differentiate negative coping mechanisms from positive ones. Your why into it and the consequences of what you're doing.
So people like coming out of the closet again, as Alan did to me. Alan is a workaholic. Alan
Uh,
would be working. She would be working while she is working. She is a workaholic. Do you do
and
do?
I love this. We're snitching everybody today. Let's do it. Somebody here will
And
need
I'm
a
walking
lawyer.
right
I'm a
now.
lawyer. Oh, she's not
I
in
tell you,
denial. Let's give her appreciation.
she would be working while at work. So you know what I mean, you know? And the mere fact that women can multitask is even worse with Alan. Now, when 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 you are a workaholic, when you want to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and pull in that file, to just read for like 30 minutes. You spoke about avoiding something. You spoke about, no, you spoke about, I wrote it down here. Consequences and something else. Consequences and what?
I said your why going in and the
Yes.
consequences of what you're doing.
Yes. So the why and the consequences, and I'm wondering. So she says, I have this file. Let me take it home. I have this work. Let me take it home. I'll probably find 2 3 hours at night to get rid of a couple of emails and is that an addiction to work?
Yes, in the context of work-life imbalance. So if you're going to take work home, and I'm not going to be academic about it, we all do it, but we shouldn't do it because at home, if you have a husband or boyfriend or kids or pets, then they require your time and you need time with them. So if you're
That's what I
carrying work
said. two
home,
o'clock in the morning when everyone is asleep.
you're working. So for
Yeah.
me, that is a negative coping mechanism if taking work home means you compromise your sleep, you compromise time with your family, and other events that require your attention. But if you take work home and you're disciplined enough to say, look, I'm going to have dinner with my family, I'm going to have 1 hour to do some work and then go to sleep and wake up at a good time, then that's positive. It is structured, it is predictable. But if that 1 hour becomes 3 or 4 between 8 and 4 a.m. in the morning, repetitively, consistently, there's a problem.
So, Alan, what's your take on that? As she is in denial right now, she will come back and tell us.
Yeah,
Sunday, okay. Alan is back. Alan, what's your
yeah,
take
I'm
on
here.
that? Are you in
Uh,
denial that you're workaholic and that is an addiction?
but you see, when we when we go over the stages of denial that Sandy discussed, then I feel like even trying to defend my carrying work home would feature in the stages. So maybe I'll not try to justify. So I'm
That's
just
stage
taking it
4.
all in. I am an addict. Yeah.
And do you think you need help?
I think I need help. Like I said earlier, this session is really good for us because we're just being called out onto the things that we're addicted to, and I'm accepting that.
Also, let me tell you why I applaud. I'm a recovery support specialist. That's what I'm training to be. I tell you, the biggest part of the work I'm doing in psychologists and treatment specialists is someone admitting, I think I have this problem, and then going, I need help, and then saying, I received help. It's those three things that can fast track your recovery or slow it down. I'll say it again. Admitting I have a problem, a lot of people are stuck. You've seen the stages of denial. Asking for help, that's the other one. So, yes, I know I have a problem, but I'm not ready for help. And then three, receiving it. I know people who call me and say, Sunday, I need your help. And then I show up, disappear. And I understand it. So, what Subi has just said, I've gone through these stages. I don't want to justify. I'm addicted to work. I need help. The exchange between you and her, that 2 minutes is 50% of the work. Now, to change that, you go into the change models I gave you, and that is now willpower, openness, authenticity, willing to do the work. That becomes a whole different thing. So it's always easy to look at someone and say, just avoid the pool table. There are stages to all of that. So I want to appreciate Alan Subi and you, Austin, for just going, yep, that's me. I'm addicted to sugar, I'm addicted to work. I need help. If people could do that more and more, we will go very, very far.
One of the lines you said earlier, Sunday, is addiction does not happen in isolation. Addiction does not happen in isolation, and I've picked that very well. So what next? I want us to take us onto the next stages now, the healing, the treatment. I want you to take us on to, you've taken us very well on the stages towards change, pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance. You spoke about relapse. I got goosebumps when you're speaking about that. Then you spoke about denial, negative coping mechanism, and all that. So, at what point in time do you think one needs to realize that a point? I'm happy, from just this discussion, Alan and I have discovered. I'm still in denial, and I really can't say that this show, as much as I want, it's across Africa. It's Wake Up Africa. It's across Africa. It's gonna be on YouTube. I'm going to share this link all across so that people can really understand addiction and how to cope with it. And at what stage now, Sunday, do I really pen down and say, you know what, I am, and how do I go about it?
So thank you very much, first of all, for putting ample time on before change, right? The actual addiction, the denial. I think you've done a great job the last hour and a half, and I applaud you for that. Now we're getting to what to do about it. Allow me to share the following. And in between there, I will answer your question in many different ways. Number one, we're talking about addiction in isolation. Addiction is linked to mental health. Addiction is linked to mental illness. These are two different things, mental health and mental illness, and I'll get to the definitions and differences. Addiction is linked to family predisposition, which means if you're in a family that has mental illness, chances are that gene is passed on. Not all of them, but some of them. If you're growing up in an abusive home and you've got generational trauma, if your father was a highly anxious person, acts anxious, you may not be born anxious, but you're in an anxious environment. Chances are you'll pick up anxiety. And how do you deal with that anxiety? Could be drinking. You see, are you with me so far? There's a correlation. When I was in rehab and they said you've got ADHD and you're grieving and you're depressed and you're highly anxious, I accepted it as fast as Alan Zubi accepted her self-diagnosis about work. I said, yeah, this makes sense. The little I knew about ADHD, I said, I have this. The little I knew about anxiety, the evidence was clear. I've been grinding my teeth since I was 6 or 7 when I sleep. That's because I go to sleep and I'm anxious. Until someone pointed it out to me, I didn't know I had that problem. I used to have sweaty palms in certain situations. I didn't know. I just thought my body is just reacting. So understand there's a direct link to your mental health. I'll say something else. Grief, Austin, has stages. Stage one of grief, and this is why I'm emphasizing stages. You're in denial. I lost my father in 2022. I wasn't in denial that he had died. I knew he died. I was with him the night before. Others are in denial, and you can look back, Alan Subi, Elliot, think of people you know. You go, this person hasn't accepted death, but this person has gone. Grief as well can be extended to the end of a relationship, the end of a job. I was grieving the end of my last relationship up until maybe last year, 3 years after rehab. I was still like, I can't believe this relationship ended. So understand it's not just losing someone. Stage two, anger,
So
frustration,
stage
and
one is
helplessness
denial, yeah?
is denial. Yeah.
Okay.
that someone has died, or I can't believe I lost my job
Number two
or my
is anger.
relationship. Is anger. Why did this person die? Why, like, how could they leave me alone? Why did my boss fire me? Why did my ex leave me? You're angry. It's a stage, it's allowed. And then you have someone telling you, don't be angry, these are God's plans. If you're angry, that will make you even more angry. So the way we respond to these situations can make things worse. I don't think people mean it in a bad way, but this is why I'm giving this information, because if you tell someone your anger is justified, I understand, let it out, that is helpful because you're not invalidating someone's feelings. Stage three, bargaining. You know what bargaining is? This is when you say, I told my wife not to drive that car, and she drove it and went into an accident and she died. Like you can actually change the past. That's bargaining. You know, I told Sunday not to take drugs, and now he overdosed and is dead, or is in a coma. What does it really matter? He's in a coma, but you're in that stage of grief where you're like, why didn't he listen to me? You know, it's a stage. So when someone talks to me about grief and I go, I think they're bargaining, I say, I understand. Let them go through that process. Stage four is depression. This is where I was in rehab. Grieving my father who passed triggered depression. So I went past all those earlier stages and I got stuck at depression. And they also don't happen in order. Sometimes they happen at the same time. You can be angry, bargaining, and depressed. I was depressed. I had grief counseling, and that took me to the fifth stage, which is acceptance. I accepted that my father is no longer around. I accepted I was no longer working the job that I was working, but it took me a while to accept that my relationship had come to an end and the role that I played with it. Now think of that in context of addiction, and you'll
Hold on.
understand why someone drinks a lot or does
Apologies,
drugs.
Sunday. Apologies. I
Yeah.
missed step four. So denial, anger, bargaining.
Depression.
Sorry?
Depression is stage four of the grieving process.
Okay. And then number five is acceptance.
Acceptance.
Okay.
You see? Now think of that in the context of addiction. So now you can understand if someone is bargaining, depressed, angry, in denial, you're in a state of mental ill health. You're emotionally struggling. Some people will then work harder, spend more time in the office because they don't want to come home to a grieving child or mother. Others will use drugs like I did because when I was high, the problems I was facing faded. I wasn't as depressed. So you become hooked onto that association. And when you're sober, it all hits you in the face. So resilience is facing your problems, having help around you, knowing that grief counseling is there to help you. Rather than drink, let me talk to my psychologist. Rather than stay too many hours in the office, let me go take a walk. That's the process. To answer your question, now you see how grief is linked to addiction. People don't see that. And there's a high risk for people who are grieving to relapse. So I wish, knock on wood, if I lose someone close to me tomorrow, Alan, Subi, and Austin will call and say, hey, brother, how are you doing? Would you like to share how you feel? And if you don't want to, know that I'm here. Austin, you and I lost a friend a month ago, right? What people didn't know is that same day I lost two friends to drug use and alcohol. And I kind of went off social media that week. Somebody called me to say, hey, I haven't seen you posting things. Is everything okay? And that moment allowed me to open up. And I said, man, I lost these two people, one I was working with, the other one I went to school with. I really appreciate you checking in on me. I am struggling. But you know what? I'm going to work. I'm spending time with addicts. I'm sharing my story in rehab facilities. Thank you. That day, I started posting again. I don't know if they knew, but they know that there was a change in my pattern. I was grieving these people. I was not in a good state, and someone called to check in on me. Just very friendly. Another guy called, a friend of ours, doesn't matter who, and they were crying, and we cried together. I tried to help this person. Why didn't they listen? I let them speak. I did not interfere. I did not interrupt. I did not invalidate. I now know better. And we healed together, and we laughed together. And it was a beautiful moment. One African man and another African man grieving another African man who died. Why do I say that? Because we're told not to cry. We're told not to reach out. We're told to kazana. That is old fashioned thinking. I want to think that person is doing better, and so am I.
Hmm.
So the
Alan,
answer to how we deal with these things is talking about.
absolutely. Talking about it, seeking assistance, and
Receiving that
going
help.
to, there's a statement, there's a phrase that says, when a problem is very well defined, it's half solved. And I'm carrying that, I'm taking that with me. Denial, anger, bargaining. I do not know which one goes first, anger or denial, but yeah, bargaining, depression, and acceptance at the end of the grieving moment. Alan Sube, what's your take on the discussion so far as we are pondering onto addiction on Wake Up Africa's episode on the 10th of May 2025? Do you have any addition, any comments? As Sunday will now take us to now post grieving stage, moment, you know, the healing stages. I'm happy, Sunday, you've said a very pertinent issue whereby I do not know, I'm scrabbling my notes all over. But there's a moment where you said, you said it so well. You said it so well that there's no cure to addiction. You just need to control, And this is when I said, if we are to publish any book, probably this should be the title, control to addiction. There's no cure to addiction. You just need to control, just as it is in diabetes. You said a couple of things. Now, Alan Subi, I do not know if you have any intervention, but I'm happy to proceed with you, Sunday, to speak about post breathing.
Yes.
Alan?
So,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I was saying, just to correct you slightly, it was there is no cure, there's management, organization, and momentum. Management is managing your issue, patterns, systems, tools, etc. Organization is the team around you. Your primary support is your family, your friends. Your secondary support team are professionals, doctors, psychologists, etc. Your tertiary support are support groups like Wake Up Africa, like ADHD support group I'm in, like Alcoholics Anonymous. Those are support groups. You have all those three, you are in good company because each one brings a certain aspect that you need. So the cure to addiction is in management, organization, momentum. Now, that being said, we're talking about how you heal from grief, how you heal from mental illness that can trigger addiction. So we'll get to my next point. What's the difference between mental health and mental illness? Mental health, Austin and Alan, is a state of well being where individuals realize their abilities and can cope with normal stressors, work productively, and contribute to their community. In short, mental health is about balance. You say physical health, your heart rate is good, your sugar levels are good, you're sleeping well, you're exercising, that's your physical well being. Your mental or psychological well-being is being able to cope with stress, being able to switch off from work, being able to process things. It's a relative scale. You'll say someone is struggling mentally when that is off. Mental illness now is health conditions involving changes in your emotional thinking or your behavior. That's mental illness. For instance, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar. There are over 400 mental illnesses out there. They're almost similar. And that's why I always say, get a clinical diagnosis. Who does that? A psychologist, a psychiatrist, an addiction specialist, a psychometrician, a doctor. I was diagnosed by a psychiatrist. Who's a psychiatrist? I don't like to assume. A psychiatrist is a doctor, medical doctor specializing on the brain and the mind. A psychologist is a therapist. This is someone you talk to, and they know how to ask the right question and diagnose mental illness. An addiction specialist is someone that specializes in addiction with regards to mental health and mental illness. So get your diagnosis, do those tests. It may reveal to you if you have addictive tendencies or not, or you're on your way there. I told you in the beginning, when I learned about what triggers my anxiety and my depression, I got to manage my addiction better. And this is not a one class. That's why I appreciate that you're giving this topic ample time, and I hope it won't be the last time. It's taken me 3 years to learn what I've learned so far, and the road was like this. And I'm fascinated more and more by my brain, by my behavior, by the engagements I have with other people. It is, and this is why I say you can't cure addiction. You can't cure mental health because the mind is a very complicated place. Your emotions are very, very complicated place. And I'll give one last example of grief, and then we'll keep going. I know a lady I spoke to 2 years ago in Dar es Salaam who told me a very fascinating story, and I'll say it in 1 minute. She was, I think, in her late 30s, giving a presentation to the chairman of her board and the executive management team. And halfway through the presentation, she started crying and wailing and shaking and couldn't control it. And this story is fascinating because the chairman intervened and said, "Excuse me, let's call her Alan. Alan, would you like to have a recess?" So it wasn't shaming. It wasn't, "Why are you crying? Would you like to break?" And just go and powder up and catch your breath and then come back and tell us, should we proceed or we postpone? He empowered her at a very vulnerable moment. And I want to emphasize that because this is how you deal with certain situations. And she said, "Please, may I have a few minutes? I will go and powder up." She came back a bit more composed and said, "I would like to proceed." She proceeded, finished her presentation, standing ovation. As people were leaving, the chairman said, "Alan, can you please wait a bit?" And she said everything went up to her throat. She thought she was losing her job. She started panicking again and crying. And couldn't understand why she was crying. The chairman told her to sit down, sat down, and then he went on to say the following. "I'm the chairman of this company. I'm very impressed by how you composed yourself and the presentation you gave. However, I'm going to tell you something people don't know. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I have some mental health issues. I've been in therapy for the last 20 years. Here's the business card of the top psychologist in this country. I don't know what's going on with you, but there is a problem somewhere. Call that psychologist should you wish to, and I will pay for it." What do you take from all of that? No shaming, no, "You're one of my senior people, you embarrassed me, embarrassed yourself." No guilt tripping, just understanding, empathy, compassion, solution. That lady, to finish the story, started seeing that psychologist. 6 months later, got promoted, and this was her issue. Austin, that lady had lost her mother when she was 12 or 13. She spent the next 20 years raising her 3 siblings and her grieving father. She focused on studies, focused on work. They all graduated, they're all living their own best lives. And at this particular moment, her mind, her emotion, her body gave in. And she started the grieving process. So she had delayed it by almost 20 years. And that's how the mind can work. So if you look at the stages of grief, she wasn't in denial, she wasn't angry, she wasn't bargaining, she wasn't depressed. It all was taken in by the body, focused on the mind. But now that she doesn't take care of her father or her siblings, who is she? And at that moment, machozi. So
Thank you so
avoiding
much,
it
son.
doesn't help. Doesn't help.
Absolutely. So, where do people with addiction go for help?
Wonderful question. Multiple ways, multiple places. And this speaks to various types of treatment. So, if you go the rehabilitation route, you've got in Tanzania what are called sober houses. It's just a house where ideally they block out the addictive issue, whether it's drugs or alcohol or betting machines. So you're not without it, you're without it. The challenge I have with such places is you don't get counseling necessarily to understand why you are negatively coping. So that's what you call dry sobriety. As soon as you leave that place, you know what you're going to do? You're going exactly back to the problem you had because you haven't changed the patterns. You don't recognize the triggers. Place number two, addiction treatment facilities. What are these? Alcohol, there are many ways to treat it. You've got medically assisted treatments, which is more pharmacological, so medication. You've got therapies, cognitive behavior therapy, dialectic therapy. These are terminologies to just mean therapy. There are different types of therapy. For those who don't go to rehab or sober houses, you can go to counseling. Talk to a professional. They walk you through your addictive tendencies and your problems, identify triggers and coping mechanisms. Some people go to psychiatric hospitals or are admitted into one, and this is mostly because of mental illness and mental health. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, manic depression. Like you have mental emotional issues and therefore you go to a psychiatric hospital. Mirembe in Tanzania, Madare Hospital in Kenya. I think Makerere in Uganda, if I'm not mistaken. They have these specialized wings. I cannot speak too much about what goes on in there because I don't have that expertise, but I can tell you, you need a holistic approach to recovery. What do I mean? It's good. Medication is good. If you have the right medication, it is properly monitored and it's taken in conjunction with therapy. Because therapy helps you understand triggers, patterns, coping mechanisms. Medication alone cannot help. It will ease, but not help. Therapy helps you understand your patterns and behaviors. And then behavior change, eating the right foods, sleeping at the right time, learning to rest and relax. All of these things come together without forgetting spirituality. Prayer is amazing, but it's not the only answer. I say that confidently. You can't pray away addiction. You can't pray away mental health. Pray, good. Meditate, good. Take your medication if you need them. Go to therapy if you have to. Support groups. Know that you're not alone. Often, if you look at the statistics on suicide and depression, you won't find many of them in Tanzania. I don't know why, but most other places they have stats, especially men. We're dying in silence, which then goes back to your original question at the beginning. Stigma, silence. Sunday talks openly. I do so because it holds me more accountable. I have the confidence to do so, and I'm really driven by trying to help those who cannot speak for themselves. Not everybody will take Sunday's approach, but it is healing for me to be on this show. This is 2 hours that I did not think of cocaine. This is 2 hours I did not think of emotionally eating. This was productive use of my time. So I tell people Journal, write, follow people who are at different stages of their recovery. Attend Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, talk to a therapist. If one therapist doesn't work, look for another. If you can't afford treatment, go online. Most of these platforms are virtual. The work that I do, to answer your question as well, Mwangaza was Sunday is a web-based platform that deals with addiction recovery and mental health awareness and advocacy. I'm trying to design different programs for people to speak up, get help, build resilience, build understanding. The show I had last Wednesday in Dar es Salaam, Unconventional Stories Unmasked, was a platform to bring alcoholics and addicts to speak. People have mental issues to speak. We had 120 people listen in, ask questions. That's how we break the stigma. These are people who are now doing much better and talked about when things were bad and how things got better and what they did. I write a lot. You talked about collaborating Wake Up Africa and Sunday on publishing a book. I would love my articles to be compiled together into a book. Let's have Wake Up Africa there and Mwangaza or Sunday there. This is how you help people. This is how we come up with solutions. There are people who cannot afford treatment or counseling. So what do they rely on? Willpower, family support, community. I told you addiction doesn't happen in isolation. Recovery doesn't happen in isolation. When I lapsed the first time, my family panicked, thought it was a relapse, and it's because they didn't know any better. So I panicked as well. But I did the right thing. I got on a bus, went to Nairobi, then to Limuru, where my counselor was. We had an open conversation, got to understand where the problem was, and I was able to fix it. You learn every time you make a mistake. But we have a tendency to punish people. We have a tendency to judge people. It's a very lonely place when you're trying to recover from addiction and mental health. It's a very, very dark place. And what we need is light. We need to hold each other's hands. And I promise you, if more people would speak openly, they will tell you. I know what Austin is thinking because we're very vulnerable. We're very emotional at the height of our addiction and at the height of our recovery. So the best way is to start building new friendships. I felt comfortable talking to strangers at some point than my own family because they would shame me, invalidate me, and it happens. They can't see past the damage that you did. But do I blame them? No, they needed help. But at the same time, I'm grateful to them because they pushed me to rehab. I'm grateful to them because today I'm in school and I'm fully dependent on family, friends, anonymous donors.
Sunday, we are left with 1 minute. Let me see if Alan Subi has any parting remark before I ask you, Sunday, to now tell us what next. What next in terms of, you have Mwangaza or Sunday, you have your writing through Mwangaza or Sunday. We are going to publish a book, but you're in school with an intention to come and work, not only in Tanzania, but I want to see that as an Africa victory. You being in Nairobi right now, pursuing some cause. Alan, are you able and ready to give us your parting remark before I invite Sunday to wrap up and close Wake Up Africa today?
Really, Austin, and it's a question to you. How do we get this message to schools and to other spaces where the young people are being recruited into drugs, into alcohol abuse? Because the recruitment is happening at such a young age now that our young people are getting to universities and are struggling with addiction. So from the podcast, what's the way forward?
Thank you so much, Alan Subi. As I did say earlier on, I am going to share the link so that we can just share this link across. I have my team that will be coming in this morning. I want them to cut a few pieces and bits to basically attract traffic. But again, it remains for you and me to really share this great content across. Alan. Sunday, 1 minute of your parting remark by telling us then what it is that you're anticipating after your studies or as you're doing your studies. I know you spoke about and did your first talk show. And this is going to go on. I would really want us Sunday to really keep on pressing the talk shows, raise some funds here and there, do some more road shows here and there so that people can really grasp the fact that, the earlier you know the situation, the better you can have a control of it. 1 minute.
Okay, in 1 minute, let me try to wrap very quickly. So, number one, when your team has edited this talk, do share with me the results. I'll put it all over my social media. Two, we need to encourage more lived experience. So, you should do this show maybe once a month, just on mental health. I will bring you people who are happy to share their stories. So, it's not just Sunday talking. We need more people with lived experience. Three, I would say from a government perspective, confidently speaking, you know how governments dealt with HIV? We made it a national health emergency. When that happens, it's an act of parliament and government resources go completely to solving the situation. More campaigns, more awareness, more help, more facilities. Education is changed, the law is changed in order to make things easier. Kenya, President Ruto, I think yesterday signed a People with Disabilities Act, which makes it now easier for disabilities to claim insurance, to get help. I don't know if that's happening in Tanzania. We need something like that. Our mental health policy in Tanzania, I believe, needs review. It was written in 2008, if I'm not mistaken. Needs more integration with the national health system. So we need systemic change. We need more people speaking. I would envision board meetings, conferences, to have a 30-minute window for mental health so that more and more people can be sensitized. We need, do you know how many psychologists we have in Tanzania? The unofficial number is something like 55. Do you know how many psychiatrists we have? About 100. We're 61 million people, Austin. That's a drop in the bucket. We need more facilities. I think we're about 35 sober houses in the whole country, no more than 45. We need more. What is Sunday's vision? I'm here to study because I think addiction is a specialized thing. A lot of those sober houses in Tanzania are run by recovering addicts who have the willpower to help people but don't have the know how. So I want to start Tanzania's first rehabilitation. By my analysis, we don't have any rehabs. We have sober houses, addiction treatment centers, psychiatric wards, not rehab. Rehab to me means psychological support, psychiatric support, well being, wellness, fitness, all in one place. You create an environment, an ecosystem. That's what I experienced. We had dietitians, we had public speakers who used to come talk to us, we had fitness coaches who used to come and help us with our fitness. So I want to open the first one, and I hope people will support me in that because it's not a cheap venture, but I'm determined to do it. We need to write that book so that we spread African stories of recovery. The more people can read about people they can identify with, the easier, the better. You need to get someone from Kampala to talk about their recovery because people can relate to that person talking in Baganda or something. It's relatability. What's another solution? We need to stop bashing each other. I know that religious groups tend to look down on counseling. And I think also people who believe in traditional systems look down on modern systems of recovery. There's always an anti medication campaign somewhere. This is very dangerous. I think what we should do is work together. I don't eliminate spirituality, it's important. I don't eliminate medication. I'm on certain medication. So let us speak from a place of love and support than ignorance and hate. And let us not discriminate people who are struggling with addiction and mental health. If you don't understand something, learn about it. And if we can do some of those things and make this a national health emergency, then we may be able to get ahead of it. Because where we're headed, I can tell you with what I know and people I'm talking to, the situation is bad. Suicide is up, depression is up, and we are not talking about it. So we should be honest enough to say, look, my wife committed suicide, but you're afraid of doing that because it's a criminal act to commit suicide. And if you survive, you can go to jail. You can be institutionalized. Now imagine someone who's trying to commit suicide. If you really think about it, they're mentally not well. You institutionalize them, you take them to jail, chances are they're going to try it again. And countries that have decriminalized suicide, like Kenya, like Ghana, I think Botswana, South Africa, the numbers of suicides actually go down. So it's an old-fashioned thinking to say, criminalize it, commercial watu. Okay, if it's working, show us the statistics. Mental health, especially this is Mental Health Month, by the way, Austin, in May every year. So the conversation should continue throughout the rest of the year. And it
I
means, yeah, sorry.
So be rest assured, Sunday, I have taken your first call that we have mental health once every month, and I am already going to think about the how. Probably not through Wake Up Africa, but we shall make sure that the content goes through Wake Up Africa as well. I'm looking on to a platform, a wider platform, whereby we call in people. They come. It could be virtual. You participating virtually with the experts, with the gurus that you want to bring in, and then we have the interview, we have Q&A, and just speak about mental health. It is a threat. It is a threat, and I'm happy that you've raised it in the context of Wake Up Africa, whereby we bring people from different nationalities, different countries, different backgrounds to really speak about the struggles that they're going on. And this is Wake Up Africa Sunday. Wake Up Africa really brings Africans together to see the common challenges that we have and come up with common solutions. We just ended an e-learning platform, and prior to that we had e-cooking cook fund workshop in Arusha that brought six African East African member states and more. We also had Malawi in that meeting, and we said, the challenges that we have in clean cooking or clean energy, the challenges that Tanzania faces, same in Kenya, same in, so it's easier when we have that mindset to really come up with the same solution and, share best practices. So I totally agree with you. Mental health in Africa, discussed in Tanzania, shared comments and contribution from Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda. They could really resonate with the rest of Africa and really come up with heroes like you, Sande, to really pen down the challenges that we have. So for me, really is I'm taking this as a challenge. I'm taking the book as a challenge. I'm looking onto the books, the talks, and the contribution that they would have to really constructing the rehab from the works that we do, and we should be able to do that. We should be looking onto partnerships. Alan will also in our side meeting see on how best we can really scale this up at different levels so we address this holistically. But truly, thank you for your time. Truly, thank you for the knowledge. I've never had so many notes back and forth, and uh, writing, slanting. It was just flowing. It was so natural, and truly appreciate the content. It's gonna go. I'm going to share this link as soon as this show ends, so that the world, Africa and the world can really know that we have heroes. Africa and the world can really know that not only that we have heroes, but we have people that really want to see mental illness, addiction, all these come to an end so that we create and we build a population, a youthful population that is really ready and happy to take Africa beyond where we are today. So thank you so much. I'm your host, Austin Makani. Once again, Alan Subi, thank you so much. Elliot, thank you so much. And the rest of our viewers, we've had quite a number of viewers today. Thank you so much for watching Wake Up Africa this morning when we were looking onto the struggles and addiction that we have for the young people who are today and tomorrow's future generation of Africa, the face of Africa. Sunday, I can't thank you enough, and let's take this discussion forward. Thank you so much. I'm your host, Austin Makani. Up until next Saturday, Let's spread love. Share the word.